Andretti's application to join the Formula One grid in 2025 or 2026 has been rejected by Formula One. And I wanted to talk about why that's both frustrating, but also not very surprising. Sadly, Formula One seemed against Andretti from the get-go. It always seemed as though it was going to be an uphill battle, but considering the racing heritage the team has, it's a real shame for Formula One fans that they've been declined to be able to race in Formula One. Formula One's reasoning covered a number of factors, but I wanted to focus on a few of them. The decision read, "Our assessment process has established the presence of an 11th team would not, on its own, provide value to the championship. The most significant way in which a new entrant would provide value is by being competitive. We do not believe that the applicant would be a competitive participant." So let's just digest this for a second. Clearly F1 thinks that if they were to change things up and add an 11th team, that's important by the way, to the grid, it would mean that they would have to have value to the championship. They clearly think Andretti, if they joined the grid, would not be competitive. They've said that. They don't think that... They're basically saying, Andretti, no, you do not have a chance. Yet we've got teams in Formula One, and we've had teams in Formula One for such a long time that have been nowhere near competitive. So it's weird that they're now making this stipulation that they're essentially saying that if a team is coming into Formula One has to deem that they would be near the front or they won't be allowed an entry. Is that what they're saying? I find that a hard pill to swallow, saying that Andretti wouldn't be competitive with the heritage they've got. We've got teams like Williams and Hadz that have struggled over the years. Currently, there aren't as many low-budget teams as there used to be because of the budget cap. So I think the playing field is more level than it's ever been. But if you look at yesteryear, teams like Jordan, Minardi, Formula One was built on minnows. It was built on those underdog stories. And when the underdogs won, that's what made Formula One incredible. And it's almost like Formula One now only wants the most prestigious brands when they're being added as this 11th team, but it has no problem with teams like, AlphaTauri being essentially a glorified billboard, or, other teams that aren't performing. It doesn't matter to them, but they're making stronger requirements for Andretti that they're not applying to the current grid. I will say this though, once a team's in Formula One, presumably it's extremely hard, if not impossible, to remove them. I don't remember ever hearing of a team being removed from Formula One. Haas joined the grid in 2016 as a new entry. Despite buying the facilities to the outgoing Marussia factory, they decided that a new entry was best. There is no way you can tell me that a company that manufactures CNC, that they're a manufacturing company, has more right to be in Formula One than a racing family like Andretti. I can't accept that. And that's not even a slight on Haas, by the way. I'm not saying Haas don't deserve to be there. I'm saying that Andretti deserve to be there just as much, if not more, in my opinion. Andretti have teams in IndyCar, Formula E, Extreme E, Rallycross. They've won the Indy 500 6 times, the IndyCar title 4 times, and the Formula E title. Michael Andretti is a kart champion, which is what IndyCar was called before it was known as it is today, Champ Car. 309 races, 42 wins, 98 podiums. Michael's father, Mario Andretti, yeah, he's got some heritage as well. Won 4 IndyCar titles, Champ Car at the time, and he is the only driver to win the Indy 500, Daytona 500, and the Formula One World Championship, which he won in 1978. I could go on, and I appreciate all of those racing stats don't mean that they should get an entry into Formula One. Williams have been struggling, more recently, the last decade, but of course, they're world champions. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything. I appreciate that, but I'm just trying to outline the heritage of the team. In recent IndyCar years, you could also say that, well, Andretti have struggled a lot more. So they're not maybe on the front foot as they used to be. What's weird to me, though, is F1 is trying to add more races to America. I just made a video a few days ago about the new Chicago trademark. So there's a potential race in Chicago. We've already got Miami, Las Vegas, Austin. So the American market is important to Formula One. And Andretti, in that American market, are probably one of the most well-known brands. So that is weird to me, because they're allowing teams like Alfa Romeo, Sauber to be known as Stake. They're allowing Visa, Cash App, Abbey, even though, like I said, it's just sponsorship. It's just a billboard, essentially. They've got no problem with that. When it comes to new teams, they're making it a lot harder. There was another reason for the rejection as well, though, which I wanted to just touch on. Formula One said, the need for any new team to take a compulsory power unit supply, potentially over a period of several seasons, would be damaging to the prestige and standing of the championship. So what I get from this is that Formula One isn't going to accept any new teams. Again, this is an 11th team. I can't stipulate that enough. This isn't just a team coming into one of the other slots, buying a team. That's different. This is to add an 11th team. What Formula One is saying is if that were to happen, they have to provide their own engine or have a partnership to provide an engine with a new supplier, essentially. Current teams, though, can get engines from whoever they want. And I've written down a list here, okay? Yep, that's just 3 names. Ferrari, Mercedes, and Alpine. They're the only 3 manufacturers in Formula One at the minute that make their own engines for their own cars. Okay, there is Honda, don't get me wrong. Ferrari, Mercedes, Alpine, which is Renault, but Renault and Alpine are the same. Alpine is their brand. Currently, there's 10 teams in Formula One. Alfa Romeo Sauber, now Stake, get their engines from Ferrari, so does Hadz. Alpha Tauri, Visa, Cash App, and Red Bull get their engines from Honda. That will be Ford in 2026, though, after they've got a new partnership, which is a good addition to Formula One, by the way. Aston Martin, McLaren, Williams all get their engines from Mercedes. So I struggle a little bit with them saying that a team needs to provide value and it would ruin the prestige of Formula One if they weren't bringing an engine with them. And I suppose they see it as a new team entering Formula One, but that seems hypocritical to me when you've got 7 teams in Formula One at the minute that don't have their own engine. That just seems like a really weird stance to have. Now, I go back to what I was saying before. In defense, this is another team. The stipulations for adding an 11th team go beyond just the team itself. And we need to take that detail in mind. I've seen a lot of people online talking about Andretti and giving the details about Andretti, but this application is not just to join Formula One. They're looking at the application of Andretti and the value they have, but also the value of adding an 11th team and all of the requirements around that. Some of the other teams were unhappy with this as well. The idea, because they would take money away from them, essentially. Prize money would then have to be shared between 11 teams rather than 10. They're worried that Andretti coming along would make it harder for them to earn prize money. Then Formula One said this: the addition of an 11th team would place an operational burden on race promoters, would subject them to significant costs, and would reduce the technical, operational, and commercial space of other competitors. Now, this is important to talk about because not every Formula One circuit has the space. This is another bay that would be needed at every track, another area for the team's media, personnel, etc. And not every circuit is equipped to comfortably do that. And that's, I think, what they're trying to say. The newer permanent circuits, obviously they've got, so much space, but tracks like Monaco and other street circuits where space might be a little bit more limited, that's going to be the struggle. Then Formula One went on to say something else. While the Andretti name carries some recognition for Formula One fans, our research indicates that Formula One would bring more value to the Andretti brand rather than the other way around. I think this is particularly harsh, but maybe hard to argue, considering Andretti is mostly an American brand. It does race in Extreme E and Formula E, which is global, but the audience for those is way lower than Formula One. And of course they have an IndyCar team, but again, does that mean their brand is really, really tied to the American market? Possibly. It's a huge brand in America, but maybe not so much in Europe. Alongside that, Andretti's plan was to use a customer engine for a few years, potentially Renault, until a deal with General Motors, maybe Cadillac, kicked in a few years' time. And Formula One maybe will reconsider their decision if that happens. They said, we would look differently on an application for the entry of a team into the 2028 championship with a GM power unit, either as a GM works team or as a GM customer team, designing all allowable components in-house. In this case, there would be an additional factor to consider in respect of the value that the applicant would bring to the championship. In particular, in respect of bringing a prestigious new OEM to the sport as a power unit supplier. To finish, I think this is the most important thing, and I do think it's something people have been overlooking. The rules to have an 11th team have to be more strict, don't they? Because this isn't just a team coming in and buying a current team that's selling their operation. This is adding another team. And what Formula One is saying, and I know people don't want to hear it, is that if we're going to add an 11th team, there has to be a good reason for it. There has to be a new engine supplier and a prestigious team that brings value to the sport. We're getting Audi, but if Audi were to have come along and said, we're making an engine, we want to put a team as the 11th, I bet you Formula One would have been, yes, absolutely. VW, Porsche, whoever it might be, if these brands were coming in and wanted to make a works team, I think Formula One would look differently on this. And again, I think they would have looked differently on it. As they said, if it was General Motors were partnered up with Andretti from day one, I think this would have passed. Sadly, that hasn't passed. And it looks like now the earliest would be 2028. And what's next for Andretti? Well, in theory, they could challenge the decision and maybe, take legal progress. Because from what I understand, they met the requirements put forward by Formula One. So if you've met the requirements, the process exists, you've met those requirements, and then you're still rejected, maybe they have cause. I don't know. I think that's probably a stretch. Either way, looks now 2028. That's the earliest we're going to see Andretti, if at all. We've seen them working on their car. They've got a wind tunnel model. They were ready to go. Or at least they looked ready to go. Don't worry though, we've got brands such as Hadz, Alpine, and of course Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. We're not allowed to call them the Racing Bulls, to keep us company for the next few years. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.